as we are now officially into September, we are going to have Hurricanes players on the ice. Doesn't matter if it's training camp or prospect showcases. Either way, we're going to see some Canes in some sweaters playing some games. Before we jump into all of that, though, Rod Brind'Amour did sound off recently on the Hurricanes 2C situation and why the team has seen so much success since he's taken over as head coach. So stick around. We'll do all of that here on a Monday edition of Locked On Hurricanes.
You're Locked On Hurricanes, your daily podcast on the Carolina Hurricanes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to a Monday edition of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you to the Everydayer for making this your first listen of the day, 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, talking everything about your Carolina Hurricanes. I'm your host, Zach Martin. I'm the credentialed Carolina Hurricanes beat writer over at the Hawkers, also the co-host of the Surgecast, which is a weekly Carolina Hurricanes podcast, along with all of my duties here at Locked On Hurricanes. Like I said at the start of the show, we are going to be going over what Rod Brind'Amour said on Canes Corner last week, mainly talking about the 2C situation and who that could be and what paths we could possibly see for the Hurricanes for this upcoming season, and why the team has gotten better since the start of the 18-19 season when he became the head coach of the team. And then for me, why do I think that the Hurricanes are going to take the next step this season? However, before we jump into all that for today's show, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Now, Rod Brind'Amour, like I said, last week was on Canes Corner with Adam Gold, and there was some talks with the possible 2C situation, success of the team. There was a lot of talk about college NIL deals, favorite movies, all that type of stuff. But what this show today is mainly going to focus about is what's been the burning question so far this offseason. Who is going to be the second line center for the Carolina Hurricanes, and why the team has seen so much success since he took over. But we're going to start with the 2C situation. So Adam Gold did bring up the question to Rod that a lot of people were wondering. Could we see Seth Jarvis and or Logan Stankoven be the 2C this upcoming season? Brind'Amour basically said he thinks Seth Jarvis is fine as where he's at with the success he's had. And he did bring up the Martin Necas situation too, is where if he feels like guys are better on the wing and he wants those guys to continue being that good on the wing, he's not going to move them to center. So that's why you never really saw Martin Necas get moved over, because Brind'Amour thought Necas was a better winger than a center. And he feels like that Seth Jarvis is a spark plug, a catalyst for a guy who is on the wing. That's why you see him on the first, second, third, wherever line he's at. So it sounds like he didn't say no, but he said most likely that's where Seth Jarvis is going to be at for the 25-26 season. And he even, when brought about Logan Stankoven, he said he's more open or considering of Stankoven going to the second line center first over Seth Jarvis, because he feels like Jarvis is a lot better on the wing and he wants him there. But Stankoven has more of a chance, but he had the caveat of if they go in that direction, being the big key word there. So if you go to Daily Faceoff, they do have Ehlers, Aho, Svechnikov first line, Hall, Jarvis, Blake, Martin, Extall, Stankoven, Carrier, Kotkaniemi, and Robinson. Now, given what Rod Brind'Amour said on Canes Cast compared to what Daily Faceoff is saying, or what they're projecting it could be, throw Daily Faceoff out the window. Jarvis is not going to be the second line center. And looks like Stankoven's not going to be doing that either. So now it begs the question, do you leave Svechnikov on that first line with Ehlers and Aho, and then do you move Jarvis to the left wing, or do you move him to the right wing of the second line? And if that case is, who's going on the left? Is that Blake? Is that Stankoven? Is Taylor Hall staying there? And for me, I don't see I just don't see where it's going to work to where you maybe have Hall being on your second line, if that's the case. I could see this being a situation where, and I put this out on my projected rosters 2.0 on Sunday. I'll make sure to link that in the description below on the, if you're on YouTube or if you're listening to the audio podcast version. I'll leave a link to where I think where my roster projection for the 2.0 is. I feel like it's going to be Ehlers, Aho, Jarvis first line. They're going to put Svechnikov on that second left wing with Jesperi Kotkaniemi at the second line center with Logan Stankoven. And I have Jackson Blake being that third line winger, and then Taylor Hall being with Mark Jankowski and Eric Robinson. Reason believing for me is the fact that you have to have Blake and Stankoven within that top 9. I don't think one of those guys should be moved to the fourth line center. Stankoven did pretty good with the Jordans, but I feel like Stankoven could be more a benefactor of a top 6 role. Jackson Blake did see a lot of time last year on the top line, did see some second line as well. But I think with what we've seen in the past so far with guys like Jarvis and Stankoven playing on the third line with the Jordans, they do adapt a little bit more of that third line. You get more defensive in your game. Your defense awareness starts to grow a little bit when you're with the Jordans because you're against the other team's top players. You kind of learn how to play that two-way 200-foot game that the Hurricanes have in their system. So I think either Stankoven or Blake would really benefit from being with the Jordans next season to start out, because these rosters could completely change as the season goes along. It's bound to happen. There's no really set lines for the Hurricanes. But if you have Blake or Stankoven on the third line with the Jordans, that's not a bad option. It doesn't mean they're bad hockey players. It's, hey, we're going to have you grow your defensive side of your game with these guys. And then you kind of look at, all right, then they're going to be with probably Svechnikov on the other side and Kotkaniemi is the 2C. And I believe that Seth Jarvis should be on their first line with Ehlers and Aho. And I know some people are going to say, well, the size and all that. And they asked about Brind'Amour. Brind'Amour's like, size is – if you're a strong guy, if you can, win board battles, get the puck, stuff like that, size is just – okay, it's a stat on a sheet. Okay, this guy could be 5'8", this guy could be 6'2", whatever. If you have that tough awareness that on your game and you can forecheck and throw some hits, it doesn't really matter because we've seen Seth Jarvis lay hits. We've seen Logan Stankoven win a bunch of board battles. So having Jarvis with Aho and Ehlers, yeah, it's a smaller-ish line. I think that line's going to be fine in that case. Svechnikov has had a lot of chemistry with Kotkaniemi. I think those two guys would work well together. Then you just either add Stankoven or Blake. Either way, you're going to have someone fast. You're going to have someone who's, going to be in their, second full season in the NHL, whether it's Stankoven getting his second full NHL season, luckily his first year with one team, and then Blake's going to his second year. I think either way, you're fine there. In terms of the 2C situation, I think Kotkaniemi would be a good third-line center, but as I talked to Corey Laviolette last week, Stahl is the entrenched 3C. Kotkaniemi is someone who I see is a little bit better than the fourth line because we've seen that fourth line's kind of not the sweet spot for him. But I will say, the Hurricanes still need to address the second-line center situation. However, I will say this. Jesperi Kotkaniemi, despite not putting up the points that you would like to see from a guy who's a 2C, he still has the defensive side to his game where I feel like it gets you something. He is over 50% in the face-off dot, so you do win a lot of face-offs with Kotkaniemi as a 2C. He does facilitate a puck a lot more than maybe scoring. If he has a little bit more of a finish, a little bit more of a selfish game to him, you might get 15, 16, 17 goals. But he does have a defensive side to his game, and he does throw a lot of hits and block shots. I will give him a lot of credit there. His defensive side of the game is really good. It's just you kind of hope the offense is there. But if the 3C option was open, I think Kotkaniemi would be a perfect 3C for the Hurricanes. It's just right now how the roster's set up can't really be there. I don't see them moving the Jordans down to the fourth line. So if there had to be a spot for KK to get another run at 2C, this is probably the season to do it. And if you give him Svech and if it's Blake or Stankoven, I think that's still going to be a solid second line, all things considered. So I feel like with KK being the 2C, I think that's probably what we're going to see going into the season. Of course, like I said, things can change throughout the season, but We do know from Rod Brind'Amour, do not expect Seth Jarvis as the 2C. Probably don't expect Stankoven to be the 2C either unless something crazy happens in training camp or during the season something changes. But if you're reading through the tea leaves, there's a good chance it's probably going to be KK back at the 2C spot to start the season. So only time will tell. Now, the Hurricanes have had a lot of success since Rod Brind'Amour's taken over as head coach. And what kind of has it contributed to all of that? Well, stick around and we'll talk about that here in a second on the Monday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. College football is back, and honestly, there's nothing better than the energy of tailgates and being inside the stands with your fellow fans. Unless you're at a hockey game, and let's be honest, hockey is just the absolute best, but college football is a pretty close second. The only downgrade, though, trying to get tickets, and it's queues, hidden fees, and prices that jump at checkout. That's why I use Game Time. That gives the advantage back to the fans and the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see is what you pay. You can pull the Game Time app, and in just a couple taps, you will find amazing deals talking about your favorite college football games as low as $25. And the good thing, too, is their zone deals are amazing. You pick the section, Game Time picks the seats for you, and you save big. And honestly, it's faster, cheaper, and less stressful than any other way that you've bought tickets before. So take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. Welcome back to segment 2 of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day. So we talked about Rod Brind'Amour giving his thoughts on the 2C situation, where I think the Lions are probably going to look at going into the season overall. Now we're going to talk about the success of the Carolina Hurricanes since the 18-19 season. So Gold asked him, what has kind of contributed to the Hurricanes being so successful in his tenure. In a roundabout way, Rod Brind'Amour and basically Gold came to the conclusion that it was the investment in the players. Of course, it's kind of tough to actually fully say what the reason is, but you can kind of read through the lines of the new ownership group, meaning Tom Dundon in the front office, basically actually caring about putting the pen to paper and bringing guys into the roster where you're not $20 million under the cap, or you're bringing guys that are past their primes, or just not really doing your proper scouting, proper development and stuff like that, and actually listening to the coaches and stuff like that. And that's why you see the Carolina Hurricanes have 7 straight playoff appearances, 7 straight first round wins. If you also count the opening qualifier to the bubble season, but either way, you won your first round of a playoff 7 straight years. You've also made 3 Eastern Conference Finals appearances in the 7 seasons that Rod Brind'Amour's taken over, 2 in the last 3. And you've seen the team, they went back-to-back division champs as well, finished top 2 pretty much every time. And I think when you look at where the Hurricanes are at since he took over, I think you're in a good spot. And for the fact that the ownership group actually cares, I think that's a big help as well when it comes to being a competitive team. And I think that's what really helped the Hurricanes, because when you look at it, it's tough when you had an ownership group that was mainly just meddling along, not really, doing anything to make the team better, went through terrible coaches and, terrible GM decisions and stuff like that. And, there are sprinkling some good ones, but that's why you see 10 years of just nothing from the Hurricanes. And there was, threats of, is it relocations or, all this other stuff. And then you get Tom Dundon comes in and you put, the front offices that you have with Don Waddell and you got Eric Tulsky, but it's the investment in the players. It's the investment of making teams better. And there's that narrative of the Hurricanes are cheap and all this stuff, mainly Tom Dundon, but Tom Dundon is not really a cheap owner, and you see the Hurricanes are always at the cap every single year, and that's the thing. So it's not just, and the Hurricanes are always a team that want to get better. Yes, it's, is it tough for fans to see like, oh, the Hurricanes are linked to this guy, but it didn't get done. It's because of the fact that the Hurricanes are reaching out and still trying, and I think that's where you see a lot of success so far, and that's why you see them consistently top 2, top 3 in the division every single season and making at least the second round the last 7 seasons. If you ask any Hurricanes fan back during the dark times of 10 years and no playoffs, and you'd be like, hey, guess what? You get to see 7 straight playoff appearances, 7 straight first-round wins. You get the Eastern Conference Final at least 3 times. Oh, and it was the captain who took your team to the Cup win in 2006. Everyone would be ecstatic. Yes, the expectations are super high now because it's like, okay, well, that's great. You've won divisions, you won the first round or two, but we haven't been to a Cup final since 06, when they can get over the hump. And, those expectations are fair to have. But when you look at where the team is at now compared to it was, like I said, not even 10 years ago, 8 seasons ago, that's a tough pill to swallow when you look at 10 years of mediocrity. But I think it's just the fact that the Hurricanes are always trying. And I think that gives them a lot of leeway and a lot of at least they're a team that's consistently trying to push the envelope. And now with Eric Tulsky at the helm, you see them taking them big swings. You go get Mika Rantanen, and it didn't work. But you still get Taylor Hall in the process, who turned out to be a guy who fits well with the team, gets a 3-year extension. You go and flip Rantanen and get Logan Stankoven, which now includes this season. You're talking 9 years of Stankoven, who fits the system well too. And you get long contracts of Slavin, Aho, Jarvis. Svechnikov's contract's coming up in in a few seasons, but he's still here long term. You're gonna, a bunch of guys that wanted to stay and come back. You got Shane Gostisbehere came back for a second run. You got Sean Walker for another 4 seasons. Eric Robinson, he could have made a lot more money, but he came back for less than $2 billion for 4 seasons because he loved the area. You got Marnica stayed, Chatfield. So it's the culture that Rod Brind'Amour and his staff have put into place, but also helps too when you have a front office and an ownership group that follows the same sentiment. And Rod said it too, is the fact that they're always talking. They're always, trying to figure out how to make this team better. Yeah, maybe Rod loses some conversations on guys he really wants, but the ownership groups or the front office and ownership's kind of like, I don't know about that. And then there's times that Rod Brind'Amour has won discussions, but he's glad though too. It's not just everyone's agreeing all the time. There are discussions. There are guys who maybe don't win out on some arguments, but you're seeing how iron sharpens iron and how, a rising tide floats all boats. And that's what the organization has done. Everyone's collaborating with each other. They're all communicating. There's not just, okay, we're the front office, coaching staff, this is your roster, figure it out. No, there's a collaboration with the coaches. Like, hey, we want guys that fit our system. Hey, we think these guys will fit in well with the locker room. And the front office does their best to do it. And you have an ownership group and an owner in Dundon who wants to go take those moves. And yeah, is he a lot more involved than a lot of other fan bases or teams are used to? Probably, yeah. But you see the constant success that the team is having, where they're, like I said, always making the playoffs, always making deep playoff runs. They're always trying to go get players. I mean, heck, they just got Nikolai Ehlers, and a lot of people thought, oh, no one wants to sign in Carolina. Ehlers signed for 6 years and 8.5. They go and get younger, faster, and offensively, higher ceilings. And Miller, you got Nick Heishan coming in for next season as well. You found some gems in the draft with Aho and Jarvis, and you got Jacob Slave, who's the best defensive defenseman in the league, and you're always seeing this team trying something. So I think what the success for the Hurricanes is that you got the culture setter and leader in Brind'Amour with his staff. You got a front office that's constantly trying to get better, and now they're taking bigger swings than they have in the past. You got an owner who wants the team to make big swings and, bring another Stanley Cup to Raleigh. And the fact you got players who are bought in and want to be here. And I think all that's culminated to what we see now as a 7-year run of the Carolina Hurricanes consistently making the playoffs. 3 Eastern Conference Finals in that stretch, 2 in the last 3. And that's why, the expectations are always either the same or getting higher every year. But the excitement's there. The team is consistently playing good hockey, and that's why you see 100+ sellouts. That's why you see them going as far as they are, and why guys want to be here and why guys want to sign here is because the culture is completely different around the Hurricanes. And I think having Brind'Amour being your head coach and going away from the coaches they had before and that random co-captain during the Revolution thing, now you're seeing, just the team interacting with fans a lot better. You see marketing, videos, promo stuff is off the charts for the Hurricanes. You're seeing the renovations now. You got some, more possible jerseys down the road, but you're seeing success of all these guys that fans love. Homegrowns, guys they've traded for, guys they've signed, and stuff like that. It's just that it's the overall just coming together of everything that's happened. That's why you see the success from the team since 2018, 19, especially with, Rod taking over. And Rod said it's the investment in making the team better. And that's why you see that if you get better players, your team plays better. And if everyone's buying into the system and pulling in the same direction, that's why you see success where it is right now. So it's a good thing to have, and it's good to the fact that you see that Rod Brind'Amour is like, it's all of that. That's why you see where the Hurricanes are at right now. So that being said, how do I feel about the Hurricanes going to 25-26? Well, stick around. I'll talk about it here in a second on a Monday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. All right, guys, welcome back to segment 3 of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day. But before we go into segment 3, we have an important request. Locked On wants to hear from you. We've put together a survey to learn more about our listeners and make your favorite podcast even better. This is your chance to tell us what you like, what you don't, and answer questions about our advertising. So go to lockedonpodcast.com/survey to get started. Everyone who completes the survey will be entered for a chance to win one of 10 $100 Amazon gift cards. Again, that's lockedonpodcast.com/survey. You can also find the link in the show notes. Thanks for helping us out. So, what are my thoughts on the Hurricanes taking the next step, or just the team overall going into the 25-26 season? And for me, I think that this is probably the best roster overall that the Hurricanes probably have had in the last couple of years. They're going into the season. I know 23-24, a lot of people thought on paper, okay, this roster is absolutely stacked. They're going to go make a run for it. Unfortunately, it wasn't the case to get knocked out of the second round. And, you just got Dmitry Orlov, you got Michael Bunting in, but you still had Shea, you still had Pesce, you still had a lot of the guys on the forward core and stuff like that. At the time, you had Nietzsche's, Drury's kind of stepping up and all that. Goaltending, you had Ronta, you had Anderson, you had Kochetkov as your third in case of a backup situation. But I think now when you look at kind of the roster, maybe there still is some question marks, probably in the forward core. How's the defense going to step up? But I think this is probably one of, I wouldn't say the best, but one of the best ones, probably like a top 3 roster overall that the Hurricanes have had under the Rod Brind'Amour era. I think when you bring in Nikolai Ehlers, who's a really good scoring winger that you definitely need. You're seeing the rise of Seth Jarvis, back-to-back 67-point seasons. Definitely could have had 75 last year. I think he can get a lot higher this year. Sebastian Aho is well on his way to probably being a Hurricanes Hall of Famer at the minimum. I can see his number retiring at some point because he's probably going to be the greatest forward of all time since relocation for the team. You got Jacob Slavin continuously solidifying what he's going to be as a possible guy who's going to get his number retired as the greatest defenseman for the Carolina Hurricanes. But you're seeing, you get the youth movement of Stankoven and Blake, and Nikishin's on the way. You got Riley Nadeau waiting in the wings. This team is consistently getting better over time. Like the defense, I think, has got a more offensive upside, a lot more speed. They're a lot younger too. Like I said, you get Nikishin, you get Miller. You saw what Walker and Gostisbehere did last year. They got better as the season went along as well. And Jalen Chatfield I think he's made himself a top 4 defenseman on almost a lot of these teams around the league. And goaltending, when Frederick Anderson's healthy, he's definitely top 10 in the entire league. I'd say almost top 5. And then you got Chekhov, who, when he's rolling, he's definitely rolling for the Carolina Hurricanes. So overall, if guys stay healthy, you get more consistent hockey out of them out of what we saw last year. And last year was a team that some people thought were going to miss the playoffs in a transitional year and then in the Eastern Conference Final. What does that say now about a team that's a little bit more complete, more gelled together? This could be a team that takes that next step to it, could make a Stanley Cup Final appearance for the first time since 2006. And I think they really could do that. So overall, I'm very excited to see what this team can do for the upcoming season because, like I said, you're going to have guys that are going to be healthy. You got guys that are going to be in their second seasons in the system that are still going to get better. Some guys are second years in their league, probably full time. Like I said, with Blake and Stankoven's, going to his second year, his second full season in the league, and this is probably the first time where it's just with one team. He's not playing between the AHL and the NHL or getting traded and stuff like that. And, you got Alexander Nikishin, who's probably the biggest wild card because this is his first full season in North America. He only played 4 games last year and was all in the playoffs. Now we're going to see what does a full season look like for him, but I'm excited to see what he can do. And you're getting Taylor Hall for a full season. He did pretty well for the Hurricanes last year, but what does a full season of Taylor Hall look like? Andrei Svechnikov had a really great playoff. Is that what was really needed for Svech to find his game that he had 2-3 seasons ago where he was putting up a bunch of points? I think when you look at the 25-26 Canes, I think they're kind of almost built to be that team that maybe does take the next step. They have $10.64 million in cap space going into the season as of September 1st. Things could change between now and the season, which starts on October 9th, or even by the trade deadline in March. This team could have a few more different additions, or it could look a little bit different because they still have the room to take that next step. So for me, I'm looking at this team going, I think this is probably one of the top 3 rosters that the Hurricanes have had since the Brind'Amour era started since 1819. And they still have a lot more room to grow. Well, like I said, with the cap space they got, with the draft capital to trade away, or however they want to do it, I think the Hurricanes have a legitimate shot to do it this year, to where they get the monkey off their back. They win more than just one Eastern Conference Final game. Yeah, it's going to be tough because you look at Florida with their team. Other teams have gotten better in the East, but I think Carolina's gotten better too. And there's a sense that the Hurricanes might have a chance to win the division this year, because you don't know what Washington's going to do. Can they repeat what they did last year? Did the Rangers do enough? Is New Jersey going to stay healthy and can they take the next step? So I feel like for the Hurricanes, this could be a possible division win this year for them, because they definitely got better over the offseason as well. And they still have all the cap space to still even be greater than what we're sitting at right now on September 1st. So it'll definitely be interesting for sure. But overall, if we look at the Carolina Hurricanes, I feel pretty good that this could be a team that does take the next step, get over that hump, and probably will make a Stanley Cup Final for the first time since 2006. Yeah, you might have to go against Florida, but hey, as they say, if you want to be the best, you got to beat the best. And if you're going to have to go and face the 2-time defending Cup champions who've made the Eastern Conference Final, the last 3 seasons, made the Stanley Cup Final the last 2 years in a row, the last 3 years in a row as well, then yeah, if you go through them, okay, go through them, because you got to beat. Everyone's going to be good in the playoffs. You just got to go beat them. So if they have to make the Stanley Cup Final by playing Florida for the 3rd time in 4 seasons in the Eastern Conference Final, hey, 3rd time's the charm. Why not go do it? Like I said, beat the best. If you want to be the best, you got to beat the best. And that all comes down to it. I think this team has what it takes to take that next step this upcoming season. I don't know about you guys. We're 38 days away, and I am so ready for the season to start here and just actually talk about games rather than just projecting what's going to happen. But it should definitely be fun for sure. But that will be the Monday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Thank you for making your first listen today. For your second listen, why don't you go check out the Locked On NHL podcast, where there is no offseason, bringing you the daily league-wide stories that matter the most with the local coverage you love from Locked On. Find Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. If you want to keep up with me, I'm at OneTrueZach on X. The podcast is @LA_Hurricanes. I'm also on Blue Sky at @TheZacharyMartin. Where if you click the link trees in my bios, you can find all of my written content at thehockeywriters.com. I've been putting out a lot of stuff as of late, so make sure to go check that stuff out as well, as we are getting closer to actual guys on the ice for the Canes in the month of September as we lead up to the start of the season in October. October. If you want to check out my other podcast, it's the Surgecast on all podcast platforms and on YouTube for Locked On Hurricanes. You can find us on Spotify, Google, Apple, iHeartRadio, wherever you listen to your podcast. Make sure to leave a 5-star rating and review because I might just read it on the show. For YouTube, it's Locked On Hurricanes. Make sure to subscribe. Hit the bell notification so you don't miss the show. Hit the thumbs up. Tell me if you like the show as well. Share with other Caniacs to become everydayers just like you. But hope everyone enjoyed the Monday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Enjoy your Monday. And until next time, as always, let's go Canes.